The Sherlock Holmes, The Devil's Dust by James Lovegrove. This is the next book I'm going to read. I thought I'd do a similar approach as the previous, as I used in the previous video movie review, namely to first record some thoughts on the book before I read it, and then do a more full review afterwards. And well, this book, I don't really know much about it. It's another book by James Lovegrove, who has written the Cthulhu Casebooks series starring Sherlock Holmes. He also has written several other Sherlock Holmes books, and this is one of them. And I don't really expect there to be any supernatural elements in this one. The primary reason for me choosing this book was that it apparently also stars Alan Quatermain, character from the writer Rider Haggard, and he wrote about characters that existed about the same time as Sherlock Holmes, and his works are also in the public domain, as far as I know, which is probably the reason for why Alan Quatermain shows up in this story. There could, of course, be some supernatural elements in it, but then they would probably be in relation to Africa, since the Alan Quatermain character is sort of associated with Africa. And my sort of knowledge, or rather what I know about this Alan Quatermain character, is that I've seen the 80s to 80s movies, saw them many years ago, and I have also read the book Solomon's Mines. I think it was also quite a few years ago. It was a few years after I saw the movies, but still, it's not recently. I don't remember much of the book. I somewhat remember the movies. They were, I guess, part of the, I'm not sure, calling it a genre is sort of exaggerating, but yeah, it was one of several movies that were made, I guess, sort of inspired by Indiana Jones, since there were only so many Indiana Jones movies being produced. There was interest for similar type of movie, and this, I think, perhaps was one of those series. So there were two movies, I think, created with sort of the same actors, and with Alan Quatermain looking for gold treasure. So we will see what relationship or what connection Alan Quatermain has or will have to Sherlock Holmes in this book. So I don't have many expectations, really. The other books I read by James Lovegrove, starring Sherlock Holmes so far, have been largely enjoyable, so I expect this book also to be so, but I guess I will actually have to read it to find out. So I'll end this part of the video here and continue it after having completed the book, which I have now done. And yes, I read through it, and the short summary is that I found it enjoyable. So let's start with a short detective review, shall we? So, does this book star action hero Sherlock Holmes, or is it a more sort of thinking Sherlock Holmes? And the answer to that is that, well, there is some action in this book, naturally, since it contains Alan Quatermain. You could expect there to be some running around, since he is, to a certain extent, a sort of pulp action hero. Well, it's not actually a pulp action hero, I guess, but it's sort of similar type of character. And so there is some action here, without a doubt, but there is also some sort of more thought out detecting going on. So yes, in this book there is more detecting going on than there is in many of the other sort of modern Sherlock Holmes books and movies. So he the premise of the book, and I don't think I'll spoil too much if I say that but there's been somebody has died. That's sort of starting point, and Sherlock Holmes is trying to sort of find out who the killer is, what happened, and so on. And while there is some action sort of involved in that, there's also a lot of detecting, looking for clues, and sort of trying to provoke reactions from potential at least suspected persons, and so on. So yes, I would say that this is I don't know, sort of somewhere in the middle of the two extremes of being mainly action and being sort of mainly mental exercise for Sherlock Holmes. It contains both things. And as for the third point that I look at in these detective reviews, it does, to a certain extent, pay off to pay attention. So if you pay a little bit of attention as to what is being said and what is happening, you might be able to guess some of what happens in the end, the last part of the book. Sort of hints as to who the villain is, to put it in that way. And yes, so it sort of has many elements, this book, and Yes, I found it enjoyable. It also has, interestingly, some supernatural elements. This is more in this book. It's more like the more traditional way that you have in many of these Sherlock Holmes stories, where the supernatural elements are treated with a sort of great deal of skepticism by Sherlock Holmes. And the supernatural elements in this book, well, you have Alan Quatermain in this book. So Alan Quatermain being a character that is strongly associated with Africa, it's not perhaps surprising that the supernatural elements also have a sort of connection to Africa. So more like witchcraft type of unnatural or supernatural elements. And I guess so. One choice or one decision the author had to make when writing this book is, I assume, how to sort of structure the book when you have Alan Quatermain and Sherlock Holmes both appearing. So, as I noted, Alan Quatermain is strongly associated with Africa, so you would think you'd either have Sherlock Holmes going to Africa and Alan Quatermain being there, or you have Alan Quatermain being in England or London, and let's say well, saying that Africa comes to London is perhaps to exaggerate a little bit, but at least sort of you have events in Africa leading to events in London, which means that you have Sherlock Holmes being sort of in his main element, while Alan Quatermain perhaps is less so. Of course, Alan Quatermain is, I think he is a British character also, so he would not be a stranger in a town like London, but of course, most of his sort of skills, experiences, connections, and so on are related to challenges and sort of problems you might run into in Africa. So I guess there's a sort of okay, that's perhaps a little unfair, but you had the two Crocodile Dundee movies quite a few years ago, and the first movie you had someone, in that case from the United States, going sort of into the more exotic parts of nature, and you had this Crocodile Lee character who was familiar with those environments. And in the second movie, you had the sort of opposite, where this character who was familiar with sort of wild nature came to, in that case, I think it was New York, at least some big American city, and so we have a sort of contrast between the types of environments the character is familiar or comfortable with. And this book would, if you sort of compare it to those movies, this book would correspond to the second movie. But of course, it's not like Alan Quatermain has never been in a big city. It's it's more that his skill set is not so easily applied in a big city as it would be in Africa, outside the settlements or towns you have there. Of course, it wasn't necessarily the way the book would go. In one of the other books I read by Lovegrove, the story is sort of very short part of the book, admittedly, but you have both Watson and Sherlock Holmes for a short while being in one of the towns in Africa. So, I mean, it was not inconceivable that the author would have done this in sort of the opposite way by having Sherlock travel to Africa. But I guess this the approach was done in this book by having the events mainly set in London, sort of the simplest way to approach it. Of course, if you really wanted to, I guess you could make a follow-up where the situation is the worst. So we have Sherlock Holmes and Watson, for some reason, traveling to Africa, and they meet up with Alan Quatermain, but that was not the case in this book, and that sort of is clear from just looking at the cover and the very short summary at the back of the book, so I don't think that's too much a spoiler. And so James Lovegrove has several books about Sherlock Holmes, as I noted, and this one, the reason why I chose this one is that it had Alan Quatermain in it, which is a sort of character I am at least somewhat familiar with, and if you don't have any knowledge of Alan Quatermain at all, this book would perhaps be somewhat less interesting than it could be if you at least have seen the movies or something first. So I guess that would be a sort of suggestion if you wanted to read this book and at least be somewhat familiar with the character beforehand. Of course, there are several books to read also. I have only read one of the Alan Quatermain books, but there are a whole series of books, and after reading this book, I was sort of tempted to revisit Alan Quatermain and see the movies again, and perhaps read some more of the books, but that will have to be in a different context than this channel, I think. And yes, so all in all, I found it to be enjoyable. If you have read some of the other sort of modern interpretations of Sherlock Holmes, this is not a bad addition to those stories. And especially if you enjoy some of the Alan Quatermain related fiction that exists, well, then this is worth reading. So it's I found it interesting, at least. And well, I think with that I am more or less finished with James Lovegrove for now. I will, as I noted elsewhere, have a look at his next book in the Cthulhu Casebook series when it comes out, and I will probably also see at that time if there perhaps is one or two other books that he have written about Sherlock Holmes that I might also take a look at. I don't think I'll go through all of them, but there's probably at least some additional books that might be entertaining for now. So that's the current plan. Next books I look at will probably be some of the other modern interpretations of Sherlock Holmes by some other author. They are sort of picked up a list of books that look interesting. I haven't ordered them yet, but when they arrive, I'll start to go through them. So that will be interesting. But for now, yes. If you enjoy Sherlock Holmes, you can do worse than this book. It's I found enjoyment in it. So yes, that's my thoughts on this book. And with that, I think I will end it. So goodbye.